Hello and welcome to the virtual towers of Binary Arcadia, where the game's gone long into the night. Hello BArcadians! You're joining us today where we're going to be delving into a new format for us, and it's one that was suggested to us by one of our subscribers and also engage us with comments. Gareth. Hello Gareth. We're going to look at games as art, and are we doing that, Tabz? Is it games as art?
Yeah, it's kind of games as this one definitely is. But I think the main idea behind this new format is we're going to kind of analyse games. I think not always retrospectively, but this game is going to be a retrospective, but through the unique lens of the game's concept art.
Right, yeah, okay, cool. And then how that's taken forward into the final game. And we're going to look in quite a bit of detail. It might get a bit mind-boggling. But the game we're going to look at is the original Bioshock. Now, a little disclaimer here. I've not really played very much of Bioshock. Unfortunately, it falls into the category of first-person shooter. And that's one that I don't really compute with because they may make me feel motion sick. But I have watched two of my good friends play a bit of this while feeling nauseous, obviously. So I do have a little insight into it, but certainly Tabz is the man when it comes to Bioshock. So Tabz, get us started. Where are we off to first?
Well, a couple of disclaimers first of all. One is to say, we will be talking about some major details in the game, and Bioshock is absolutely kind of a monolithic game in terms of its narrative. Kind of revolutionized the narrative aspect in video games at the time, and it's like a good film that you have memories of, that you remember, that had impact, and especially when it comes to things like twists in the plot. You don't want to ruin it for anybody, and that goes for films that are 10, 20 years old. So I'll absolutely say that if you've not played Bioshock and think you might at some point, please consider playing it first and coming back to this video. No matter what we do, even if we do the best job in the world, we're not going to be able to convey to you the actual sensation of playing the game through, from that first person perspective as a player. And it just won't have the same effect or impact. So, we kind of implore you to go and play it in the flesh. Otherwise, you've been warned, we are going to go into some pretty heavy details. At the same time, though, we are only exploring Bioshock via, 6 kind of pieces of concept art. So we are going to be painting some broad brush strokes. This isn't going to go too in depth. We want to just kind of give you a flavour more than anything. Consider it a bit of a gateway drug into the Bioshock universe. There are plenty of other videos out there and podcasts which do a much better job than what we're going to do. Much more detailed, much more studious, scholarly, you might say, and academic. So please feel free to check those out afterwards. Rich and I are just two enthusiasts who like to talk about stuff, and we thought this sounded like a great format just to kind of trial. And why not just jump in the deep end with a game like Bioshock with so many deep themes and provocative interpretations, if you like. So yeah, I think that's kind of disclaimers out the way, Rich.
Definitely.
So I mean,
so just in case that wasn't absolutely clear, spoiler warning, spoilers ahead.
You've been warned. Should we just kick off with obviously you said there we played it a little bit with our good friend Ryan, didn't we? Not Andrew yes. Ryan from the game, but another Ryan. And yeah, I was blown away at the time. I remember being very envious because I'm sure it must have been on the Xbox, was it, Rich? Because we didn't have one and he did, didn't he?
Yeah. It must have been. I don't know. Must have been.
And I remember being very envious of the graphics because they were, at the time, pretty amazing, weren't they? Quite astonishing. I remember.
Oh yeah, I mean.
Remember the opening cutscene, and you might recall the plane crash. You can see these beautiful water effects.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was
one thing that struck me, how good the water effects were. Probably, obviously, times moved on, but at the time that was, as good as it got in terms of, water effects. It was stunning.
absolutely. I mean, we'll come back to it. We'll touch upon it as we talk through the concept art, but you know, the sense of atmosphere in Bioshock is, especially at the time, I think it was practically unrivaled. And
oh yeah,
and that was a big part of it for me. It was a real experience.
Well, I think that's one thing I thought you got. So, Rapture, which is the world, I think that's what the world was called, isn't it?
That's right.
It was portrayed as this hustling, bustling city, but actually, when you're in the Rapture during the game, it almost comes off a bit like horror movie like.
Absolutely.
You know, everything's really eerie and dark and damp, and like you say, this atmosphere is created, and it does put you a bit on edge. You know,
there's definitely a tension, isn't there? That's
oh yeah.
You know, it definitely veers into being almost a survival horror, even though you know, nuts and bolts, it's a first-person shooter, but they kind of say it's a thinking man's first-person shooter because it tried to subvert some of the, you know, the normal conventions of first-person shooters and to, you know, I suppose move that genre on a little bit.
And actually, that's one of the things I really enjoyed, and that's one of the things I ended up doing a bit when we were all playing it together. Was that there was these like puzzles that you could do, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll do the puzzles.
Yeah, you like a good puzzle, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. So I was on them.
And when you say puzzles, I mean, we'll just let the audience know there's like these hacking sections throughout the game.
Yes. Yeah.
Optional, of course, at least for the most part. But yeah, they involved, was it kind of like the passage of water through a pipe system and you had to lay in the right pipes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's it.
Which is quite compelling, actually. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we think that's enough of an intro, Rich. We'll just kind of go in now to setting the scene a bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
So before we dive into the first piece of concept art, I really just kind of wanted to cover off the kind of the biggest inspiration for Bioshock, for Rapture, that kind of hangs over the whole game. And it's really a philosophy that has roots in real life, if you like. So, you know, you can check this out. Ken Levine was the kind of visionary behind Rapture, behind Bioshock and Rapture. And he happened to read, and I've read the book myself as well, The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, who is a philosopher and author, and was a big proponent of this philosophical, what's the word? I suppose model, if you like, or theory, that she actually came up with called objectivism. So, I mean, we could spend another hour just sitting talking through objectivism. It's
let's not.
No, exactly. It's a deep well, and I'm not going to do it any justice in what I'm going to say here, but it's important just to set the scene. So the main tenet, if you like, of objectivism that applies to Bioshock is that above all else, the highest moral value for an objectivist is self-interest and almost, if you like, selfishness. So what I mean by that is, above all else, Ayn Rand would say that you should always look to serve yourself, progress yourself, and in fact, by the philosophy, helping others, or altruism, as we might call self-sacrifice, is actually almost immoral, I suppose, in her eyes.
And by that, does it also suggest that you walk over other people to better yourself's interests? You know, is it self-damaging like that, or others damaging like that?
See, she actually put a tenet into it, her particular brand of objectivism, to say that we shouldn't treat people as means to our own ends. We shouldn't do anything that would be destructive to others. So that was the kind of clause, I suppose, in her objectivism theory, which, you know, tried to prevent that. However, I suppose Ken Levine's version of objectivism, he takes it on a very extreme slant. Yeah. So he probably doesn't stick truly to Ayn Rand's vision of objectivism. He takes it in a very different direction.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say, in Bioshock, often things happen at the detriment of somebody else.
Well,
I'm sure there's sometimes that moral, you know.
Well, this is the other
dilemma.
thing, you see. What Rand said was that objectivism thrives economically and socially, I suppose, in a capitalist environment. So, and a specific type of capitalism, which is known as laissez-faire. I think it's a French word. And essentially what it means is a capitalist economy which is not regulated, has no kind of government involvement, no strings attached. It's kind of just left as a purely free market for people to, to put their sweat and tears into and earn what they can from it. Now, I think you could say Bioshock is something of a critique of not just objectivism, but by extension capitalism, or at least in the, in these extreme degrees we see them. Because in capitalism, I think it's almost an inevitability that in a free market, that when there's a winner, there always has to be a loser. There's going to be profiteers, and there's going to be people who, lose out and can't compete. And obviously the middle ground and in between all of that as well. But especially in these kind of aggressive capitalist markets, and you could say a capitalist market that isn't regulated in any way, that doesn't have welfare, that doesn't have the distribution of wealth to those in the greatest need, because perhaps they can't get ahead, they don't have the talents of the best of society. It can become quite destructive and, not good for the many, but maybe particularly good for the few, the talented few. So essentially, Andrew Ryan, who is this great visionary that Ken Levine created, he's kind of an amalgamation of Ayn Rand, if you like, and people have spotted this out. It's quite well known, but the actual name Andrew Ryan and Ayn Rand, if you rearrange a few letters there, maybe knock a couple out, you can kind of make the names for each other. Yeah.
It's like is it called an anagram?
Anagram, perfect. That was the word I was looking for the other day when we were speaking, Rich. So an anagram more or less of each other. But not just that, just to touch upon, apparently Rockefeller as well, J.D. Rockefeller, I think he's a famous American oil
tycoon.
Yeah, tycoon, perfect. And essentially there's a little bit there. He built this, the Rockefeller Center, or at least he funded it to completion. And it's this kind of Art Deco, magnificent building. And the parts that Andrew Ryan in Bioshock inherits from Rockefeller is, he is this kind of rich tycoon, as Rich says, who has these grand objectivist plans. He feels oppressed in his society. He wants to divorce his current society, and in fact heads out to, create what is a city under the ocean, so he can start from scratch, and live this objectivist's dream, if you like, which he thinks is going to be this utopian paradise that's going to make everything great. So I suppose, he's like Rockefeller in the sense that he's pumping all this money into this, as we'll see in the concept art, this kind of architectural masterpiece. So it's all about this unbridled objectivist manifesto, left to thrive, and to the extreme. And obviously we'll see where it goes from there, and I think the concept art will give us a few clues. So is that enough of a scene set, you think, Rich? Is there anything more you want to add? Or
brilliant. I think you've covered it, mate, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think that gives us an idea. If everyone followed that, it gives us a good idea of sort of where the game's coming from. I like that.
Good man. Right then, so we'll jump into the first piece of concept art. Now this is actually a piece of fan art. I believe it's from DeviantArt. I don't know if the person who did it is down below. We'll try and find out and flash them up on screen, but we'll be putting this up on screen, Rich, as we talk, just so everybody can get a good taste of it. So what are your initial impressions, Rich? What do you see? What does it make you think of?
Well, it's fairly obviously under the sea. That's and it sort of it gives almost an impression of a bit of a coral reef. I feel the buildings of the coral and the bright lights, so that maybe the urchins and stuff that are on the coral. But I mean, it looks magical, doesn't it? You know, it looks like this magical place under the sea. Futuristic, you would say? Would you say it looks futuristic?
Absolutely. It's like, you'd almost say, for those of you may know of Blade Runner, it's like that kind of Blade Runner-esque sci-fi landscape, but as Rich points out, under the sea.
But then in an old style, like the buildings are in that like old style. Buildings don't look like that in Blade Runner, do they?
No. And yeah, I think there's definitely some Art Deco kind of leanings there in the architecture. But you know, you see these neon signs; they're very kind of Blade Runner-esque.
Yeah.
And the big clue, obviously, to tell us that this is set under the sea, if you haven't already seen the kind of the fish and the bubbles, is this bathysphere just on the left of the screen.
And also, there's almost like a shimmer on the picture, as if you're looking through water at something, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
definitely. And it's kind of framed with this, what you can see, almost bits of the seabed to the left and to the right, which is, it's kind of cool. So yeah, so this piece specifically, as Rich says, it's setting up this idea of rapture as this massive architectural feat. Obviously, we can see, we've alluded to Blade Runner, there's that futuristic element to it. And that's a big thing about the Bioshock universe. They call it a retro-futuristic style. So you've got kind of a combination of two things which seem very, separate. How can something be retro and futuristic? But that is, I think, a big thing about Bioshock, and the game's concept artists and designers say it themselves. They referred to it as a magical realism that they tried to imbue the game with. So as Rich said, initial impressions. Go on.
So I was going to say, I think the magical realism, if you to break it down, it basically means the marriage of high tech, so like super futuristic, or magical because it's too far out that we can't understand it at the moment, with something historic. So in this instance, you've got high tech for being able to have a city under the sea with the historic Art Deco style and building types married together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can come in many forms. The magical part is just some sort of fantastical element, and as you point out, a city under the sea is pretty magical, pretty special. And then, as you say, though, it's anchored by things that perhaps we're more familiar with. So, as you say there, Art Deco design, it's from our past. The whole era is that, has that retrospective styling, and it's taken entirely, I think it's set in the early 1900s. So yeah, absolutely. And it certainly does give it a unique and eye-catching style. So
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see here as well, and this was part of what Andrew Ryan was trying to achieve. He took the best of society, or at least what he thought was the best of society, and invited them to this new utopia that he was creating. And in fact, that's what, again, that we talk about this magical realism. That realism is created because they make a logical, rational story around all these fantastical elements, and that is borne out in the fact that all these best people apparently in this new society. Well, in the early days of it, they did succeed, and in fact, they made scientific progress, like the world had never seen before. Hence, what we're seeing here. So things like the bathysphere and all these, we can see there an allusion to plasmids in the game.
I mean, it's really interesting because I think that's a good, maybe a good motto for life. So the idea is that you take all of the best people of society and put them together in one place, and that should, in theory, be the greatest achievement in humankind. But actually, after a certain point, their own needs, wants, power, whatever, causes the breakdown of that society. So it doesn't necessarily comprehend that if you take the best people of society, or what's perceived to be the best people of society, and put them all in one group, then you'll get the best possible outcome.
Well, exactly. It was this kind of think tank of excellence, if you like. But, as you say, I think they didn't have any restraint, did they? there was no moral restraint because the highest moral value was progress and self-interest. So, you know, what goes hand in hand with that? Well, ego. And I think ego untamed can be a very dangerous thing, which is what we end up seeing. But just while we're finishing off and rounding out this particular piece of concept art, I think what it also does is it you know, it gives us this broad kind of outside looking in. You know, there's almost a sense of this is a microcosm of society. It's like a city in a bottle. Or was it in The Simpsons, Rich, where they had this kind of whole culture in a petri dish? Was it Bart or someone had like a...
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that episode?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And it's like they were going through the stages of evolution.
Yes.
You know.
And then eventually, didn't they blast off in a little spaceship out of it?
Yeah, something like that.
I'm sure they did, yeah.
So yeah, essentially you get this sense of this kind of miniature world, which is like, as I say, a microcosm of society. And again, the allusions to themes here of Bioshock in many ways is a kind of a study of society, social dynamics, and as Rich alludes to, as we'll move on through, the breakdown of society and order. So yeah, is that all right with you, Rich? Do you want to say anything more? Or should we
beautiful, mate.
Moving it on.
I like that. I like the idea of that city in a bottle, because that's in essence what it was, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like the idea of that and the visualization of that.
I'd love to have a little Bioshock, you know, on my mantelpiece. What are those things you shake? I forgot what they're called now. With the snow.
Snow globes.
Snow globes. I'd love to have a little Bioshock snow globe. Could be a future project there, Rich.
Oh dear. They're getting more complicated.
Ambitious. Yeah, but you know, certainly it catches the eye, doesn't it? This particular piece of art. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah, massively. Definitely.
Kudos to whoever designed it.
Moving on.
So next up, knock this one out. So here we go. This is actually an official piece of concept art. It doesn't actually give us a credit specifically on this. It just says 2K Games. So I'm not too sure on the individual artist is. But certainly, well, Rich, do you want to take it away? What are you seeing there? What are your initial impressions?
Well, I mean, it looks high class, doesn't it? It looks highbrow. Everyone's well dressed, although everyone's well dressed historically, if that makes sense, because they all look like they're, you know, like 50s or 60s dress, you would say.
Yeah, certainly you get the sense that it's, you know, it's obviously a very formal do, and it does look back in time, doesn't it? There's architectural elements there. You can see on this little fencing, this surround that they're leaning against. That's certainly looks retro.
And it looks grand, doesn't it? It looks, you know, flush. It looks, you know, like gold colours, and it certainly portrays it as like a very luxurious place to be.
Oh, absolutely. And it's obviously some sort of a ball, isn't it? A big party, and you can imagine, as we know, you know, Ryan's best and brightest all coming together and celebrating this new paradise, which appears to be thriving, doesn't it, as far as we can tell?
Yeah, exactly.
As you say, you know, there's this bounty of colour going on and a gold tint to everything, which just makes it look hugely wealthy. And also, yeah, you know, just...
That I think that's the overarching theme in this picture for me is wealth. Everything about the picture looks like it's, you know, the way they're dressed, the way that the scene has been set. It just looks like it's very a wealthy party.
Absolutely. And this is obviously Rapture very much before the fall, if you like. So again, we get that sense
of this was in its heyday, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And we get that sense of that, you know, the magic going on, as we said. And also, you know, we start to get this another theme in the game, which is kind of truth and illusion. So, you know, what is the truth of things? Is Rapture what it's, you know, made out to be? Is it as Ryan envisages? He's obviously this huge idealist, as was Ayn Rand, with her philosophy. Never really got the chance, I don't think, to test it out necessarily in real world. But is idealism, does it always apply that well to life in practicality? Not so sure. So yeah, again, utopian beginnings, all seems well, until. Anything more to say on that one, Rich?
No, mate. I think you've hit the nail on the head. From an engineering standpoint,
Let's go there.
I'd just like to. So the backdrop, that huge piece of glass or pieces of glass, if this was on the bottom of the ocean, I don't think that would be possible.
No,
you see these. You see these submarines that go to the bottom of the ocean, and they have these tiny windows, and it's simply because they can't make it strong enough to withstand the pressure of the ocean. Whereas if this is on the actual bottom of the ocean, the windows would have to be tiny.
I see what you mean. Portholes, because the pressure applied to.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's that magical part, isn't it? You know, we're supposed to suspend our disbelief, I suppose, in that respect. But we appreciate the engineering perspective always. So yeah, that's that guy. Let's move on. So again, another official piece of concept art, and we can see at the bottom here, Rich, it's Mauricio Tejerina. So,
well done.
Yeah, thank you. What are we seeing now, Rich?
Well, we're seeing in my mind, we're seeing the fall of Rapture. This is like what we've just looked at is where we've come from. This is where we are now. The breakdown of Rapture. The breakdown of the structure with the leaking. A broken world. I don't know whether this is the similar statue, but is this of the man with the globe on his back?
Atlas, yeah. You could almost say this is like the reverse perspective of what we've just seen from on top of that balcony, looking down upon the globe.
That's it.
It's obviously a different interpretation of it, but yeah, it seems to be a spin on that.
And all of a sudden, we're into that, what I mentioned earlier, that this is suddenly feeling it's a bit horror-like. We're in a bit of a horror story. We're in a dark, damp,
gloomy
environment. Yeah, exactly. And it really brings it down compared to what we've just seen.
You've got Atlas, the statue of Atlas, which is literally broken and looks now like almost a disfigured body, doesn't it? Which again adds that kind of horror vibe. And that's also a literal kind of foreshadow of what's happened, isn't it? It's the fall of man. So Atlas is this, famous figure who's holding the whole world on his back, and well, he's broken, isn't he? Humanity has failed at this point. I don't really know what those. There's some sort of shuttles that are broken down on it. Some sort of kind of maybe like a monorail system that's.
Yeah, see, that sort of looks like that, doesn't it? Like it's come crashing down, and that's what's caused the statue to be smashed.
And it looks more, like a shipwreck, doesn't it? I suppose at this stage.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's interesting that it looks like that, given it's under the sea. It sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, because although it's a building under the sea, it is sort of a ship. It just doesn't move around.
And it makes me think at least a bit of Titanic. That comparison when everything's hunky-dory and it's beautiful and it's, clearly a lot of money was spent on the ship, and then obviously as it's sinking, everything is just completely transformed, isn't it, in the process of that?
Exactly.
So any engineering insights on this one?
Not on this one, but the windows again. If we were at the bottom of the ocean, I'm not sure you could have the windows that big.
These are smaller though, at least, aren't they? I suppose. But yeah, these ones are massive, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I think this is what adds a lot to the beauty, that as we say, that magical aspect.
And it creates that the idea of the world, doesn't it? Without that, if there were just portholes, it'd just be like you felt like you were on a submarine. It needed that, so you got a sense of where you were, and it wasn't, if they cut it off from the ocean too much by putting maybe more realistic windows, then I don't know whether you'd get the sense of immersion quite like you do.
Yeah, and it had a nice. They used it in the game quite a bit. You could see the odd whale drift by outside the window, or I think there was even at one point, I don't know if it was Bioshock or a subsequent game, but you could see a Big Daddy kind of hulking along the bottom of the ocean outside.
Yeah.
So it just allowed a nice little a few tableaus there to enjoy as a video game.
And it's weird. It's weird as well. You're in this world that's gone to rack and ruin, and yet outside of exactly where you are in the dry, the wild world outside is thriving still.
Well, yeah,
it's unchanged.
That's the hint, isn't it? Towards nature is reclaiming what it wants. You know, where it wants actually. You know, that man is falling, as we've said, into chaos, and nature is coming in to reclaim. Because, you know, nature's a constant, man, you know, we happen to have many flaws, and unfortunately we can default to those, you know, what makes up the worst of humanity. You know, it seems to be the case in this. So yeah, so we'd say this really does depict the fall of this objectivist paradise, this specific brand of capitalism has obviously gone dreadfully wrong. And as we said, it's a bit of a sinking ship. So are we ready for the next one, Rich?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's continue this journey through Rapture. Quite enjoying it, actually. So next up, we've got...
Wow.
Do you know what these are, Rich? Do you remember?
Yeah, this is Big Daddy and Little Sister?
Yeah, they're kind of names for them. Like, there are many Big Daddies and many Little Sisters. But... you know, talk us through what you're seeing, what's it make you think of?
Well, I always thought the Big Daddies looked a bit like, you know, the old school divers. That, The old, you know, you saw them in old pictures, the old like diving
used to dive for sponge or whatever, didn't they, back in the day? And...
yeah, but that's, I've always thought that's what they look like to me. And it's really strange because the Big Daddies have this role to play of looking after the Little Sisters. And they do that in like a caring way, but if you cross them, they're like incredibly sinister, you know, and really aggressive, you know. So it's crazy that they could have those two edges to them.
No, absolutely, and I think you would say these two kind of characters are very much the kind of the poster boy and girl of Bioshock. They are extremely eye-catching, intriguing, as you say, this retro design of the old diving suit with these kind of little girls that almost look a bit monstrous in their own way as well. So just as a bit of background, these are essentially products of this, what's become, you know, this dreadful dystopia in Rapture. And essentially it's a product of this kind of capitalism gone mad. So they discover in Rapture these sea slugs, and these sea slugs, you can extract from them what's known as Adam. And essentially what Adam does is we can give you power-ups, or what it does is it can change your genetic code in numerous ways, or I think almost implied infinite different ways, and give you superpowers. So, you know, their idea is, in this capitalist environment, let's make money off this, you know, let's evolve, let's become the next big thing, you know, no moral restraints, let's just go nuts. So what they actually find out is that if you implant these sea slugs into somebody's belly, you can yield something daft like 30 times the amount of this Adam. So obviously that means they can scale up, they can produce this on a mass scale. So strangely enough, the only host, though, that they could find could actually, you know, almost sustain these sea slugs in their bellies was Little Sisters, or what were essentially young girls. Ryan apparently didn't actually know how this started and what was going on. They opened this orphanage for girls, I understand, who they're essentially exploiting as human batteries almost.
Wait. Hang on. So in this utopia, where everybody's, you know, living this grandiose life, there needed to be an orphanage. How does that work?
Yeah, I'm sure it is an orphanage.
That doesn't make any sense.
I'm sure it's an orphanage. We might have to fact check that.
Doesn't...
Well, this is the thing, though.
Right,
yeah.
It's a whole.
Well, this is it, though. As we've said, it becomes this dystopia because in this laissez-faire capitalism, there always has to be losers. And there are a lot of people that lose out, and Ryan's response to that would not be to, oh, let's protect the weak and vulnerable, let's regulate the market, let's put welfare in. He would just say, well, that's the way it goes. You gotta work. It's the sweat off your own back that makes you either a success or a failure. So get to it. Anyway, just to get back, we were talking about these. So the Little Sisters, they're essentially used as these batteries to mass produce Adam, which Rapture is very fast getting hooked on. It's the next big thing. They think it's the progress of humanity, evolution of humanity. Now, to protect these Little Sisters, I'm going to skip a few beats just in the interest of time. But the big daddies are actually brought in eventually by Ryan. They're created. So what they are is criminals, which violently are conditioned to look after the Little Sisters. And when I say violently, I mean, I think in most cases they're given lobotomies, so basically brain damaged, presumably to make them obedient. And they are then mentally conditioned through, I can only imagine, some sort of brainwashing and programming to see these, Little Sisters as almost as their daughters, I suppose, and vice versa. The Little Sisters there's a bond created between them, so they have this kind of almost a symbiotic relationship, but one can't live without the other. Very much in the game, these figures are symbols of pathos. They are symbols of, the pity that the player feels sorry for. Obviously very evocative when you have these essentially little girls who are getting exploited in such a way.
I mean, that's what you would say about this piece of concept art, is the girl in this piece of concept art looks distraught, damaged, beaten, and the big daddy is all powerful, carrying her to a better place, to safety. It's that that contrast between the power of the big daddy and the fragility of the little sister.
And as we've said, a lot of the terror and that we've talked about, that kind of sense of dread and tension, well, we can see they're quite a gruesome pair, aren't they, really? And I remember playing the game, Rich, I don't know if you recall, but I think we at least got to maybe one or two big daddies. You hear them before you see them. These kind of moans like a whale, deep guttural moaning, scraping of their diving suits that in fact they're grafted into. And it's a sense of dread, and they are formidable opponents. They are not to be trifled with. You have to hit them hard and hit them fast, or they can take you down pretty quickly.
Well, more often than not, I think you would choose to avoid them.
Yeah, if you can. I think in a lot of cases you can't, because of course, and that lends us nicely, a big feature of Bioshock is this kind of moral dilemma that the game likes to challenge the player to. So you would essentially, you always have to kill the big daddy in the game before you can get to the little sister. And the point of that is, well, you have a choice. The game offers you a choice. You can harvest the Adam in the little sister to essentially further your ability to use these plasmids, these genetic power-ups, or you can go on.
And presumably that would kill the little sister.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, harvest is absolutely it means killing them. Or you could choose to save them. So it's essentially extract this sea slug that's in them. You don't get the same kind of rewards, or at least initially, that you do for actually harvesting them. And the game is literally actually offering you a kind of choice of philosophy. So on the one hand, you've got this objectivism, this kind of boundless self-interest and ambition. Well, I'll just kill her because the highest moral value is looking after myself, making myself the best I can be. The other side of it is altruism. It's self-sacrifice. It's saying, initially I'll take the hit. I'm not going to get as much of this power up that's going to make me better in the game, but I'm going to save her, and I'm going to kind of engage my morality, or at least a more conventional kind of morality. So it's really interesting how the game literally asks that of the player. So yeah, and I mean, just to touch upon, there's some other themes that we'll come back to, but these guys as well, they kind of bring up the argument of free will and determinism. So that is, do we actually have true agency in life generally? Or is everything we do, everything we become, every choice we make, is it just caused by the environment, that we're a part of, and the product that we are made because of that environment? And these guys literally are products. They've been, engineered, programmed to have this specific relationship for specific tasks, which is why it's so pitiful, really, isn't it?
Definitely.
So yeah, I think that gives us a real flavour of those as characters, Rich, and
definitely.
Again, you've got that magical realism, haven't you? Magical kind of fantastical characters and gruesome and sinister, but at the same time, well, they've got this kind of loving bond between them, which is very real, and you can empathise with that. So
definitely.
Should we move on?
Definitely, mate.
Right then, so next up, last two now. So let's try and whip through this one. So, what are we seeing, Rich?
Well, it's an advert for this plasmid, and it's saying you can evolve, you can become better, and it's obviously suggesting that you can move stuff with your mind, you can become massively strong, you can heat stuff up with your mind. It's almost showing you that the world could be a better place for you if you take on these plasmids.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you get a sense of the era again, don't you? The sort of
definitely.
This sort of advert, you could almost imagine it, back in the day in our universe, our reality.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of charm. They use a similar sort of styling in the Fallout universe and franchise.
I mean, it looks very fanciful,
And you notice all the figures are smiling, they're having a great time, which is obviously, at odds with the rapture we know it becomes.
Yes, obviously, yeah.
So you've got this sense again of truth and illusion. This is an illusion, isn't it? This is the pretense of this, paradise. It's propaganda, essentially.
Yeah, basically. In essence, that's exactly what it is.
But yeah, as video gamers, what do we see? We see power-ups, don't we? We see cool things.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like you say.
We see game changers.
Yeah, super strength. She's cooking somewhere with the bare hands. There's electricity coming out, and then telekinesis there. Yeah.
Which all of those were things in the game, weren't they? Couldn't you get these like power-ups in the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it was a first-person shooter. You had guns, there was melee weapons, but a big part of Bioshock was this, you kind of on your other hand, you weren't holding the weapon with, you had plasmids, which would be a range of different abilities that will complement your arsenal, if you like. And that's again what was a big part of Bioshock's identity, I suppose you would say. It really introduced emergent gameplay dynamics. And we talk about that a lot, Rich. We're a big fan.
We are, yes, definitely.
Hideo Kojima is obviously also a master of that particular gameplay style. So yeah, it's giving you like a new dynamic, a new mechanic within the game to kind of complement you in combat situations. So in the game, for example, where in a normal first-person shooter you might just shoot somebody dead. Well, maybe your ammo's limited, you want to reserve that. Maybe the enemy is standing in a big puddle. And guess what you've got? You've got your electricity plasmid on hand. You zap that puddle, that's going to create, a kind of an elemental effect and actually fry that person if they're standing in the puddle and save you vitally your ammunition. And there was, go on.
Couldn't you use the telekinesis to like move enemies around? And in my head, I seem to remember some amazing ragdoll.
Yeah, there was
physics
some good
effects
ragdoll,
when you when you actually, when you threw someone across the room, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you could dump people around and chuck people into each other. There'd be oil slicks where you could set those on fire.
I do remember that as well. Yeah,
there was loads of these kind of context-sensitive opportunities to use plasmids, and it was a big part of the game because ammo, at least on harder modes especially, wasn't bountiful. We talked about it before, but in this way, Bioshock was a bit of a survival horror game where you had to manage your resources carefully. And there was potentially something around the next corner that could kill you dead. So
the one thing you would say about this concept art is it portrays like these plasmids and how they can evolve you as like an amazing thing, a really good thing, but actually it becomes a very sinister thing, doesn't it, in the game? It's potentially that's one of the reasons why Rapture falls, because of these things, and the people go power mad with them.
Absolutely, it's aspirational, isn't it? It's like that figure of Atlas, isn't it, with the world on his back.
Yeah,
this is what we're going to become as humans, and it even says there, pick your plasmid and evolve, because they think they are, the next best thing, don't they? They think they're the next step in human evolution.
Yeah.
Little do they know that obviously it's getting well out of hand, and untethered from morality, it's all going to get very bad very quickly.
Yeah.
So that's that guy. I think
cool.
I think we've covered that one off. Rich, you happy with that?
Yeah, really happy, mate.
And then finally, by the way, that was also an official piece of concept art. Rob Waters.
Nice.
And we're also going to look at another piece of Rob Waters concept art. And this is the man. This is the man with all the blood on his hands.
Well-dressed man.
Yeah, he is indeed a sharp-dressed man. What's your thoughts, Rich? I mean, there's not an awful lot going on here. It's a character design.
No, I think he looks a little bit sinister.
Yeah, he certainly does. He's got that kind of very serious look. Hands in his pockets.
Pencil moustache.
Looks very deliberate, a man of thought and intelligence. Obviously a man of his era as well.
Of course, yeah.
Tiny feet.
Yeah, actually. And I know that was the style there, to have very wide trousers, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. It's mostly the trousers, that creates that effect.
Yeah, definitely. But that, we sort of don't really go for that kind of thing nowadays, do we? It's
skinny
sort
fit.
of like more fitted. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, so
come on.
This is the climax, of course, and I will touch upon here, the big twist in Bioshock's narrative, and something which really does, stand it apart from other narrative games. And I would say, this is the thing which really made Bioshock a piece of art, a game as art, as we've discussed.
Well, this was the big twist, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that you weren't really expecting, were you? It was not something. Well, it's certainly something I didn't foresee. I didn't play it for a long time with you guys, but it's not. You don't even think about it. It's happening.
Exactly, yeah. So, in a nutshell, as I say, guys, spoilers, please go and play it before you carry on, but if you insist. In a nutshell, you build up to this almost what you would say traditionally is going to be a climactic boss battle with Andrew Ryan, the main antagonist of the game. And instead, what happens is a series of revelations. So basically, you've kind of been led throughout this whole journey by this character Atlas, this Irish chap who, you think is kind of on a revenge mission, kind of maybe like a good rebel, a kind of a rebellion against this dystopian, horrible creation from Andrew Ryan. But as we get to Andrew Ryan, he actually tells us essentially that we're being controlled. So we as a character have been brainwashed. Everything we think up until this point is not the case. We are essentially enslaved to Atlas. And specifically that comes through in a trigger. So if we think, what the MCU, Rich, the Winter Soldier, he's this...
yes, great example.
What do they call him? He's been brainwashed. He's like a super soldier that's...
Yeah, I can't think exactly what they called him, but yeah, there was like things and they could activate him basically.
Yeah, there would be a trigger phrase, a trigger word, and the same goes for our character Jack. Who we've projected into, for the most part, he's this silent protagonist, much like Link in Zelda games. At this point, we're feeling very much comfortable in his shoes. But we get told by Ryan, who actually turns out to also be our father, that we've been triggered throughout this game by the phrase, "Would you kindly?" So essentially Atlas throughout the game, and you experience a flashback, has been saying, "Would you kindly do this? Would you kindly do that?" And that's the trigger mechanism for making us do it, against our own will. And obviously as a player, we've just not picked up on that. It's very subtly done.
Well, yeah, why would you?
But this is of course hugely meta. And do you want to remind us, Rich, what meta means for those BArcadians that may not know?
So meta is like breaking the fourth wall.
Perfect.
So that's like something that it realizes that it's a game, or it references the fact that you're in a game.
Yeah. Exactly. So
in essence.
So basically, as Rich says, it's breaking that fourth wall, and it's kind of saying to us as players, well, actually, you think you've been playing this game, we've played you, because, none of this has been your own decision, your own choices, the illusion of choice.
Just clever, really.
It's very clever. And, it actually stops and makes you think for a second. You do feel a bit foolish.
Yeah.
And we talked about these themes of truth and illusion. Well, there you go again. The kind of game, the whole game in a way, the narrative is an illusion. And you have this kind of mic drop moment of truth, of the way things actually are.
And how do you feel when that happens, Tabz? Do you feel wronged, or do you feel?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture.
Do you feel satisfied? Do you feel?
I think the fact that it surprises you and subverts your expectation is, exciting and enjoyable, and you think, oh wow. But in terms of, if you really invest in your character Jack and you become a part of it, you do feel a bit, that sense of agency has just been taken away from you. And I think it's asking questions of you as a player, what you are conditioned to as a gamer. So when we play games, we're very task oriented. It's always about, we'll go and do the next task, go and do the next thing. And there's very little thought in consequence, is there?
No, not
we
at
just
all.
want to push it on. We just want to progress.
Yeah, I don't think really in any games you think about the bigger picture, do you? You're goal orientated. You're going, right, this is what I need to do now. This is what I need to do now. You're not thinking, well, bigger picture. What am I doing here? What's the story? How's the story going to play out? You don't think like that, really.
Absolutely. And the game here is literally bursting that bubble for a minute and making you think, maybe I should think a little bit more. And it's not just necessarily about the game. Maybe it's asking us, we've talked about how it's this kind of study of society and social dynamics. Maybe it's kind of saying to us, are we conditioned in our own lives to doing things that thoughtlessly, perhaps?
Born into bondage.
Well, yeah. And again, it throws up this whole...
There's a Matrix reference for you.
Yeah, I like it. But again, it throws up this whole free will determinism argument that, Jack was born into this environment and he didn't really have free will. He was being played all along. And you could say, just like the Big Daddy and the Little Sister, products of their environments, in the wider world, we are part of a society. Are all of our actions, predetermined by all of these causal elements, the family we were brought up in, the friends we know, the people we're in, this capitalist environment. These are all causal elements that you might say, you might think we've got choice and free will, but are we destined to be just a product of our surroundings?
I mean, there can't be that many games that make you think that deeply about life and the universe and right and wrong. And
that's what I would say is, for me, a criteria of a game as art. And we've touched upon in our top 10 video, Shadow of the Colossus. It does a similar thing. It makes you stop and think. And instead of just, it being this virtual world that we project into, but it's nice and safe, we can kind of pull out of, very easily without a second thought, and it's all in our control. Well, for a minute, because of that fourth wall break, your bubbles burst, and it's the game pushing into the real world, outside of the virtual world, and it's a very, very unique thing. I don't think it's easy to do. It's a very difficult thing to craft in video games. So, yeah, Bioshock should absolutely be applauded for that. So yeah, Rich, that kind of brings us full circle. There's more to the game after your confrontation with Andrew Ryan, but I think that gives us enough broad brushstrokes to go from to give everybody a flavour of the game, the themes, why we think it's such a spectacular and interesting game. We've seen, as we've said, this whole kind of this miniature study of a society that had such promising beginnings and has obviously devolved into, well, utter chaos, dystopia, madness. It's a society essentially that has been stripped of its humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the critique against objectivism, capitalism, at least in these extreme forms, that they leave morality behind. And a society without morality, totally self-interested, creates a very hostile world, which is just not sustainable. So yeah, I think it's very interesting, and perhaps at one stage we'll do another one of these on future Bioshock games, but they certainly explore other philosophical theories. And it's just a real rich tapestry of subject matter to explore. And I think whilst Bioshock had its flaws and it got some things wrong and it wasn't perfect as a video game, it did enough right to really, put itself up on the mantelpiece of gaming masterpieces, and certainly games as art.
And it obviously did enough to get multiple sequels. Was it Bioshock 2, 3? So,
yeah, 2 didn't have Ken Levine at the helm, and then you've got Bioshock Infinite, which got Ken Levine back in, and then he's kind of fractured off. He's got his own little kind of dev team now. I think things went a bit pear-shaped at 2K Games after that, but that's another story for another day. So hopefully, anyway, we've had a good crack. We've tested our new format out, Rich.
Definitely.
And I think the next victim of this new format, if you like, is intended to be perhaps The Last of Us.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to do a piece on The Last of Us, aren't we? Not necessarily like this. I think potentially we'll do a piece like this, but we're also going to be a couple of Last of Us videos sort of linking more in towards The Last of Us 2, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it might be kind of a kind of this format light. We'll probably touch on some concept art briefly as part of a broader discussion of the original The Last of Us as kind of a scene setter before we talk about the sequel, The Last of Us 2. And start to share our excitement and theories on that game.
Exactly.
So, I think that's about it. Rich, any final thoughts from you? Are you happy to wrap this one up?
No, I think the one thing I'd say, how would you play Bioshock today? PC probably, I would say, the easiest way of playing it.
I think probably the best way, yeah, you're going to get, if you've got a decent computer, you're going to get a better experience. I think there's a collection out. I think you can buy it on Steam, very reasonable prices these days. Get all 3 games and go nuts.
Perfect.
So yeah. But yeah, please guys, go on.
I was just going to say, you know, it's not a game that appeals to me because of the first person shooter thing, but watching others and hearing other people talk about playing it, it's a good game. It's well worth playing.
Oh yeah, these sorts of games are really favourites of mine, where they offer you this adventure, this journey. You know, it's got its roots in the likes of Half-Life, Deus Ex, all these sorts of first-person role-playing experiences that I find them endlessly fascinating. So yeah, magical realism. I think that's the kind of the overarching theme of this one. So yeah, thank you very much everybody for taking the time to watch this. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I don't know if we've even got a few Death Stranding fans that might have found a similar sort of beat and rhythm to this one as our analysis. Please let us know if you did like it and drop us a like. If you didn't, then dislike of course, but just let us know in the comments. Exactly. Let us know what you didn't like so we can try and improve. If you want to see more from Rich and I, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for notifications. Really helps to grow and support what we're doing. And yeah, I think that's about it. Another one for the archives.
Stamped and completed.